It's coming up on 4 years since I got my autism diagnosis. 6 years since I first suspected it and began listening to autistic advocates and researching neurodiversity. The diagnostic process from my first GP appointment to my receiving that diagnostic report took about a year, and it was a process which forever changed me. It was like a couple of years of the most intense and bizarre therapy you've ever had. I can only speak for myself, of course, but it was... Look, okay, so I've done that whole chemicals on beaches, trying to find a higher consciousness thing. But there is no finding yourself quite like realising you're autistic. Trust me. And the spark, the inciting incident which paved the way to diagnosis, it was a YouTube video. An autistic woman just describing her autism, talking about herself. After a lifetime of not quite understanding people, never really relating, her words represented a whole new world opening up to me. Just relating so strongly with other people, a thing which I was starting to think was impossible. It was so profound. I decided pretty much as soon as I was diagnosed that I was going to start making autism advocacy content to pay forwards some of what I had learned from this space. The person who made the video, which started me along this path, doesn't make videos anymore. In fact, a lot of the creators who I once learned so much from have stepped away from social media altogether. Because while content creation might be a job well suited to disabled people, it's no easy game. Burnout and declining mental health is a problem facing activists and advocates of all kinds. This is another video about diagnosis and self-diagnosis and autism advocacy and self-advocacy and community. About what community even is, about support and growth and barriers and limitations. There's even a little section where I have a bit of a rant about the more corners of autism advocacy. TikTok, I mean autism TikTok, let's face it. Both diagnosis and self-diagnosis are things which people have opinions about. At the polls, you've got people who say that self-diagnosis is basically lying and therefore harming neurodivergent people. And then you've got people who think that any capitulation to mainstream psychiatry, including seeking a diagnosis, is harmful to neurodivergent people. And you know me, I'd hate for anyone to think of me as a centrist. But, I mean, for me, in many ways, diagnosis saved my life. And it's no secret that disabled people need diagnoses in order to access potentially life-saving resources.
Yeah.
But we should be working to undermine a system which withholds and gatekeeps resources from those who need them, as well as undermining the neoliberal-esque ideologies which don't necessarily consider the health of the population to be much of a priority. I was always going to seek a diagnosis because I know how necessary and validating it can be. But my goal is a world where that doesn't need to be the case. Many, not all, but many self-diagnosed autistic people are people who genuinely do want to get assessed but can't. The barriers facing people who want autism assessments can vary from place to place, but so too can the implications of diagnosis. Cost is obviously the first barrier to anyone who lives somewhere with private services. I was living in Ireland when I was diagnosed, and the whole thing ended up costing about €2,000, including the trip from Galway to Dublin, because the psychiatrist who referred me didn't know anyone closer who would assess adults. I am glad I did go where I did go though, because the psychiatrist who did my main several hour long in-person interview thing, she said that she worked on a team that was one of the first teams to specialise with working with autistic women for NHS England back in the day. So that was handy. Another barrier to diagnosis can often be being a woman or female presenting. If I was living in the UK when I decided to get assessed, I might not have had to pay so much, but I would probably be on a pretty long waiting list if I had managed to convince my GP to refer me at all. I mean, I had to convince my GP in Ireland. She was literally already writing me out a prescription for antidepressants while telling me that she doesn't think I'm autistic because I'm like making eye contact and stuff. Classic. A tale as old as time. That I should just take these and maybe get some therapy for social anxiety. After I pestered her a bit and refused the prescription, she agreed to refer me for an assessment to see whether or not I should be assessed. Like the first round of auditions for Team Autism. So you've got costs, you've got waiting times, you've got a lack of understanding among GPs who can withhold access to further inquiry. Oh my god, just quickly, I have to tell you this. When I first moved to Bavaria in southern Germany, the GP there said that he doesn't believe in autism. Said it's just a fad of people who like things to be symmetrical. The only GP for a whole town. Imagine trying to get a referral out of someone like that. Just doesn't believe in it. You may live somewhere where accessing the necessary specialists is almost impossible. You may have individual mobility limitations which make it impossible. You may worry about professional implications, legal implications. There are laws protecting disabled people depending where you live, but laws like this are hard to enforce. You can have all the acts in the world, but there's nothing to determine what goes on in the mind of the person who is interviewing you for a job or an apartment. And even if you know you've been discriminated against, unless you have the resources and inclination to sue their ass, nothing's really gonna happen. So definitely join unions, both worker and tenants. Seriously, what are you waiting for? Go. Maybe you live in an abusive or exploitative situation. Maybe you're a refugee or living somewhere currently unstable. Maybe you live in a place where there is an awful lot of stigma about things like autism. Now, I know there's stigma everywhere, but I think we can all agree that there are probably some places where it's worse to be autistic in than others. The question of whether or not one should even disclose their autism is an ongoing one which depends highly on individual circumstance. Because there is still stigma, there are still a lot of wrong assumptions. There are still dickheads who don't give a damn about no civil rights acts. Maybe you just have more pressing things on which you want to spend your time and energy. The point is, there are many reasons why an autistic person might not get a diagnosis. And there are plenty of people who wouldn't even want one because they think that the entire concept of psychiatric diagnoses, the idea that a field with mostly white, male, upper class, European roots, that they should be the ones to get to decide on the boundaries between ordered and disordered thought, well, they think that's not a good idea. To be avoided. And it's a position with which I find myself increasingly sympathetic. And we all know all about social constructs. I mean, if you watched my channel for a while, you will do, because half my videos are about them, and how the field of psychology is ever changing and adapting, how dependent on cultural norms they are, how the cultural norms themselves are dependent on the power structures within them, and how historically Psychology has been no friend to the neurodivergence. But I did get a diagnosis. I filled the pockets of the tycoons over at Big Psychology. And I typically advise that people get assessed for stuff if they are able to. Because, like I said, for me, it was necessary. I am disabled by my autism. I'm disabled by my autism when I'm alone. And I would be disabled by my autism in a perfect society. Oh, but why do you feel the need to be productive, eh? Because capitalism. No. Because humans do. We want to do stuff. If you were a true Marxist, you'd know that. We have a limited, finite time in which we can do stuff, no matter what society gets up to. There are millions of autistic people out there who need daily care, not because of any societal, constructed, philosophically meta explanation of how power and language interacts, but because they need daily care to stay healthy and alive. Their access to care will be defined based on the society in which they live. The manner in which their disability is perceived will be defined by the society in which they live. The social model is almost always involved, but it's part of the story. I am otherwise disabled too. I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and I get a lot of chronic pain and decreased ability from that. My joints, they're trash. Society could improve my state of being in numerous ways. Packaging, for example, could be a hell of a lot easier to open. But if I'm in pain, I'm in pain. Chronic pain is something that, in my opinion, the social model barely touches. If my nerve pain is flaring, it doesn't really matter what I do or don't do. I also think that I potentially, in fact, probably, have POTS, ADHD and dyscalculia. But as we know, accessing the necessary specialists to get assessed can be extremely difficult and time-consuming. But despite all those hurdles, all those wasted hours, all that money spent, all the dismissal and ignorance, I still feel the need to be formally diagnosed because I am disabled and I know I need help. And I know that in all likelihood, the amount of help that I will need will increase over time. And wrong though it may be, you usually don't get any help unless you can prove that you need it. And I know that resources and supports and benefits for autistic people are extremely limited and vary quite a lot depending on where you live. But the fact remains that any access to any of the help that exists will usually require a formal diagnosis. Some people might be relatively happy and well supported and might view a formal diagnosis as a kind of frivolous, take it or leave it form of validation, if anything. A fun pursuit of self-discovery, an answer to the question, why do I feel different? But to others, access to the supports that are only provided post-diagnosis is life-saving. But validation too can also be life-saving, or at least life-changing. One of my primary thoughts when entering my diagnostic process was, are there ways that I can make my life easier, more comfortable, less painful, less isolated, less disordered? Yes. Being an undiagnosed autistic person with undiagnosed physical disabilities really messed me up. My body and my mind were hurt badly. I blamed myself for all of it. I could never work out why I just couldn't be like other people, etc. and so forth. There was blame. There was guilt. There was shame. There was self-loathing. There was so much pain. And methods to alleviate said pain that never seemed to help and sometimes made it worse. And when they didn't work and only made it worse, I blamed myself. And I tried harder and more. And I burned myself out and caused even more physical pain. I wanted to know how to get better, how to stop getting worse. A diagnosis saves the pain, both physical and mental, of the unknown. It saves time, effort, money on pursuing treatments that will never work. If a person has ADHD, for example, and access to medication will give them relief from debilitating impacts of ADHD, if it will allow them to be the kind of person they want to be and do the things they want to do, then the fact that the entire concept of psychiatric diagnosis is all a social construct that is influenced by harmful power structures is inconsequential to the lived experience of that person who now has access to a material tool which will change their lives for the better. We have such a short time on this planet. If there is a thing about me, a thing which ought to change the way I approach life, myself, and others, then I want to know. Could I have known that about myself without external confirmation? Maybe. Maybe if I had a pretty strong sense of identity, but we all know I'm a no-self theorist when it comes to that kind of thing, so that makes it hard. See? I dig it. All that deconstruction. I think it's great. Just think it's a bit limited, especially when it comes to lived experience and subjective suffering. Or maybe I could have known this stuff if I could be like fairly sure that I could trust my own judgment. But the thing is that part of being like diagnosed comes with an awful lot of what I think could rightly be called gaslighting. And I know that's an overused word, and I know that like even pointing out that it's an overused word is itself becoming something of a cliche. But yeah, gaslighting. You are made to feel like an unreliable narrator of your own experience. When you go to professionals with problems and they basically say that they see no problems, when you know you are suffering and are in pain, and you are literally told that there is nothing happening, there is nothing wrong with you, you can start to feel really rather silly, kind of childish for complaining at all. With my EDS and potential POTS, like doctors were running surface level tests and they were all coming back fine. Like I was never laughed out of a doctor's office, but when the tests would come back fine, that was it. There must be nothing wrong then. Go have a massage, get some rest, and maybe take these antidepressants. My God, you would not believe how often I have had antidepressants foisted upon me. I never took them, and I consistently score low on like tests to see if you're depressed or not. It's unbelievable. I'm in my mid to late 30s, and I've been going to doctors with unexplained symptoms since I was a teenager. And so honestly, at some point, I kind of self-diagnosed. I started living as if I have EDS, and my life improved dramatically. My pain levels improved. I did the same with autism, living as if I was autistic. And now I'm living as if I have POTS, just in case. But living as if you're out like me, comes with a very high risk of imposter syndrome. And it's not as if that goes away when you get diagnosed. It doesn't. So maybe I could just declare all these things about myself without a diagnosis. There would be nothing wrong with that. Self-diagnosis is valid. It always was and will be. Let me reiterate, self-diagnosis is valid. And this channel will always be accepting of all neurodivergent people, diagnosis or not. I also feel the need for the completeness which comes with diagnosis, which is pretty autistic of me. Actually, apart from the possible ADHD side of things, I'm kind of stereotypically autistic, to be honest. Like, if I'm not actively masking, it's apparent. And I am disabled by my autism, as much as I also celebrate it. I knew I would always struggle with things others didn't, knowing that there is a reason why. Having words that I can use to describe my experiences, words that other people can understand, knowing that for the first time ever, I can start off on the same page as the specialists I am consulting, it's magic. And sure, the criteria may fluctuate over time as all definitions do, and we still need to work on the balance between not pathologizing stuff while also accepting the fact that disabled people are disabled, but having access to the word autistic held undeniable meaning for me. Why do you want a label? So many people have asked me since I started pursuing a diagnosis. It's not a label, it's an adjective. And because I need to be able to communicate my experiences accurately and clearly. Everybody does. Access to language is fundamental, and so is access to community. Isolation is one of the biggest social pains facing autistic people and disabled people in general. I mean, of course it is. When we talk about society being inaccessible, we're not being metaphoric, it's all extremely literal. Both professional and social lives are more difficult for disabled people. A job and some friends. It's basic stuff. But professional and social spaces can be anywhere from completely and utterly inaccessible to really quite uncomfortable and difficult to navigate. See, I'm not anti the social model. I feel like I need to caveat that because I've been quite critical of the reductionists. But I've always found it incredibly difficult to make and keep friendships, despite my wanting to. If we don't have a class or a job or something to force us together, I find it really hard. And honestly, my particular combo of disabilities also makes getting on public transport for an hour into the city also pretty bloody hard. As a younger person, I just couldn't understand why my friendships went the way they did, why it was so hard to make new ones. But I knew for sure that I was the common denominator, and that other people didn't find it so tough. And this is another thing about self-diagnosis and autism in particular, right? Other people have noticed and pointed out our autism the whole time. We just didn't know it. I have heard other autistic people, autistic people who were diagnosed as a kid, I've heard some of them say that if you're late diagnosed, that you must have been fine at school. Because, if nobody noticed, and people noticed, they just didn't know what they were seeing. I was born in the late 80s, so a 90s kid through and through. My school was underfunded. 90% of the teachers there seemed to hate their jobs. There was a lot of poverty in my hometown, a town which had absolutely nothing going for it. My school was what we would later call a shithole. Built in 1958 and knocked down a year after I left it. Half of the science department was in these supposedly temporary terrapin blocks, which had been there since at least the 80s and which noticeably reeked of mould. I was bullied from the first year to the last. My teachers didn't really know what to do with me because I would struggle for apparently no reason. There was one teacher who knew me best and she could tell there was something. She used to say I wasn't like the other kids. She used to say that I wasn't a sheep, which honestly kind of disrespectful to the other kids. And the friends that I did have, the main thing we had in common was being rejected by the rest of the kids. My mum rarely took me to the doctor, and the only time she ever did was when I was sick, to make sure I wasn't dying of something. Mould inhalation from the science department, for example. The idea that she would have ever taken me to a child psychologist is hilarious. But people noticed. They just didn't know what they were looking at. By the time I was 9 or so, I had learned that my vocal stimming, my info dumping, my meltdowns, they were something bad. Things to change, to suppress. Coming from my mum, people are looking was a threat. I learned that rocking back and forth was something that crazy people did. I learned that hand flapping was super weird, something that the other kids will point and laugh at. I learned that if I didn't want to be a terrible burden and a spoiled brat, that I would eat my food. I would force it down with water, and I would wear those clothes and sit quietly and not make people look. As I got older, I would dream of a day when I could leave that crappy town and that awful school, and I'd get a job and I'd find my gang and I'd start my sitcom life where we'd all hang out and love each other forever. Things didn't work out exactly like that, but maybe that's okay. Because I've learned now that it's less about the place, less about having a super active social life, and more about finding my people, my clan. My coven of witchy endy bitches. Everyone needs someone who gets them, someone who understands. This can be harder if you have a marginalised identity, even harder if the nature of that identity makes it harder to maintain friendships and socialise with people. As a proper little 90s kid, I remember well the advent of the internet. I was 12 or 13 or so when we first got dial-up internet in our house. Secondary school was the first time I had seen a computer in an educational setting. The difference that the internet made to everyone's social lives has been astonishing, but for those of us with marginalised identities, that difference, for many, has been life-saving. I do realise that I keep saying the words life-saving, and if you think that's hyperbole, then I suggest you go look up the suicide rates of autistic people. I began to realise I was autistic after watching a YouTube video. Honestly, the same goes for EDS. It was disabled and autistic people who made me realise something so fundamental about myself. And it is disabled people who still help me the most to this day. Oh, but I'm not here to say that every single thing said by every single autism advocate is good or helpful. Oh no. There are in fact a lot of discourses out there which frustrate me to no end. Oh, so I really don't like it when people basically go, I'm autistic and I do this thing, therefore this is an autistic thing. And let's face it, TikTok's full of it. But I especially dislike most discourse about neurotypicals. Now, I've spoken about neurotypical people in generalised ways before, for example, like neurotypical people might struggle to understand our experiences, but neurotypical people have no internal monologue. Or neurotypical people don't want you to answer their questions. I saw a TikTok recently, and it was basically an autistic creator saying that neurotypical people don't ask questions to gather information, they do it as a way to berate you. And the example that they used was, why are you doing it like that? That if an autistic person asked you that question, they would be just genuinely and non-judgmentally inquiring as to your motivations for doing it that way. But when a neurotypical person asks that, it's because they want you to do it differently. And if you answer the question, they just see it as an excuse and they don't want to know those goddamn neurotypical. And in the comment section, there was people asking like, well, then how do neurotypical people gather information? And people were responding to say they don't. They do not. They just assume that they already know. Neurotypical people do not gather information. Are you okay? What time is it? Where is the bus station? Nope, never happened. not from the mouths of a neurotypical. When that family asked me for directions the other day, they were probably just out to judge my local geography knowledge. Unless they were autistic, in which case they probably actually wanted to know where the shops were. Look, yeah, okay, I get it. Questions can be and often are loaded, and autistic people can struggle to pick up on those things, and it would be better if people could be clearer and more direct in their language sometimes. And I do understand that this might all be a bit tongue-in-cheek, bit of a jokey joke, but in that case, where is your sarcasm indicator, you ableist piece of shit? Sarcasm. But if I was doing something and someone came up to me and said, why are you doing it like that? I would at least assume that they know of another way to do it, and I would definitely need them to immediately tell me what they normally do. I mean, a lot of these TikToks are just younger people who have maybe started working somewhere and have encountered micromanagers for the first time. Neurotypical people see things in this way, or neurotypical people think X when you do Y. Most of the time you're just talking about individuals you've met, not a group as a whole. And honestly, bold of you to assume someone's neurotypical. Like, I'm a firm believer in autism dar. Aut-dar? Like, I think that autistic people can kind of spot each other kind of quickly. Like, I'm fairly convinced that that's a thing. But can we spot a neurotypical? As somebody who has absolutely no brain-based disability whatsoever? No learning or intellectual disability, not OCD or dyspraxia, not any kind of mental health or mood or personality condition, no brain injury or synesthesia. No, I don't think that we can sniff out a neurotypical in the same way that we can sniff out other autistics. I think that what happens quite a lot is people wrongly use neurotypical when they mean not autistic or holistic, and that any lack of understanding or empathy for autistic traits is deemed a neurotypical thing. But stuff that autistic people might dislike or struggle with might be well enjoyed by otherwise neurodivergent people. Just because we hate it doesn't make it neurotypical. And I do think that a lot of the time when people talk about neurotypical culture, what they actually mean is either corporate HR managerial culture, which everyone hates, or white North American English speaking culture, which most of the world hates. Extroversion and a somewhat hyped up confidence, or the familiarity with people who you don't really know. But those are all like good things. That's a pretty American idea. Even here in Germany, a lot of the social conventions of the USA just don't really fly over here. My partner works for a company that has a lot of staff and clients in the USA, but he primarily works with customers in the EU, and a lot of the training that he's received on like how to approach customers or how to close deals just do not work here. Like, if anything, you're just going to piss them off and make them ignore your calls. Customers here want to get straight to the point and don't want to waste their valuable time on small talk with sales representatives, nor do they respond well to the pushier kinds of sales pitches that are popular elsewhere. I have a feeling that autistic people in the audience would prefer to work in a culture that uses direct language and wants to get straight to the point, but that doesn't make the USA neurotypical. Germany is not autistic, it's just different. Not every culture is big on small talk or being familiar with people you don't know. Many cultures value personal space, a cool heart, introversion and thoughtfulness. And many other cultures value confidence, positivity, kissing and touching strangers, passion, even in situations where I don't really think it's particularly necessary. And different languages don't have the same underlying implications and meanings and nuances to words. none of it is inherently better or worse, it's just different. I prefer certain cultural norms over others, and so does everyone. I don't think there is such a thing as neurotypical culture, and I don't think that you can tell if somebody is neurotypical without asking them. Oh, or when people misrepresent data, right? So, for example, there's this study, it's famous, I've talked about it before, right? That says, it shows that autistic people have a very strong sense of justice, and we're like much more likely to act within our moral compass even when nobody is looking. This study is famous because we like to joke about it. It seems to pathologize having a strong moral compass, and I think that mockery is perfectly justified. There is nothing wrong with having a strong sense of your own moral compass and to act always in ways that you think is the best, even when nobody's looking. And it does seem incredibly silly to pathologize such a thing. But do you know what else is really silly? To turn that into autistic people are more morally just than others. We are not more morally correct. We are not inherently better people. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain the implications of such thought. You think some people are better than others, or more supreme than others. To have a strong sense of justice could be a bad thing if the things that you think are just aren't. There is no shortage of bigoted, fascistic, misogynistic, racist, classist, ableist autistic people out there. Plenty of the contributors to your anti-SJW, anti-woke, fake disorder, cringe, 8chan-esque corners of the internet are autistic. Elon Musk is autistic. Has Twitter become more or less morally just in recent months? These people might have a very strong sense of their own version of justice, and that's probably not to be commended. And look, I enjoy and have partooketh in good-natured jokes that are intending to use the same kind of pathologizing language that is used to describe us, to describe neurotypical people. It's hilarious. I understand. But sometimes it can lead to generalizations and a lot of wrong assumptions. Sometimes. So like, oh my God, guys, misinformation abounds. There's even a study about it. A study which is gaining traction across the internet, which proves that almost half of the information about autism on TikTok is inaccurate. I mean, look.
Don't trust TikTok for trustworthy info on autism.
TikTok videos on autism largely inaccurate.
The TikTok effect. How the social media app helps spread autism misinformation.
Autism misinformation is spreading on TikTok.
A disturbing number of TikTok videos about autism include claims that are patently false. Study finds
it's almost half of the videos delivering information about autism, which are receiving the same amount of engagement as accurate videos.
Yeah, it's not great that nearly half the information being consumed by people is incorrect.
Except it doesn't say that. The authors looked at a selection of the top videos on the hashtag autism tag. The vast majority of the videos on that hashtag were not analysed as a part of the study, as they did not meet the parameters of being informational. Either they were just for entertainment or mostly were personal anecdotes by autistic people. So these kinds of videos, which make up the vast majority of videos on TikTok, they weren't part of the study, rightfully. Hashtag autism currently has, at the time of writing, over 30 billion collective views. But at the time of writing the study, it had 11 billion. As the authors note, the videos that they actually analysed That's English language videos which purported to be informational. A total of 133 videos amounted to 1.7% of those 11 billion hashtag views. So we're talking about a pretty tiny percentage of the top most liked videos on one autism hashtag. There are, of course, multiple hashtags that autistic creators use. So 41% of the 133 chosen videos were deemed inaccurate, and a further 32% were deemed as overgeneralizations, and 27% were deemed as accurate. The accuracy of the videos was compared to current scientific understandings of autism as it relates to diagnostics, treatments, and cures. I can't get into how a lot of the current scientific understanding of autism might be somewhat less than accurate in this video, so let's just take them on their word there. Oh, but actually you should go and read this report about how the scientific accuracy of autism research has been hindered by the presence of ableism. But so when I looked, this was the top video on the hashtag autism tag on TikTok.
Autism test. If you put over 5 fingers down, you most likely have autism. Let's start. Put a finger down if you fidget a lot when you're in public.
And what the was even that? Spam rubbish seems to rise to the top of this app, and controversial or misleading content typically gets a lot of views. Often hate views, or stitches debunking the information in the video. So when you're looking at the top views on a hashtag, you often get a lot of videos that got up there due to being controversial in some way, or for going viral for being cringe. A statement like this: if you have an autistic child, then you should consider enrolling them in an ABA program. It's one of the only evidence-based treatments for autism and is considered to be the gold standard. That would have probably been analysed as accurate, given that it is in line with the current scientific and medical understandings of autism. Current understandings which autistic advocates and survivors of ABA are passionately challenging. However, their rebuttals to such a statement would probably get classified as personal anecdotes. Also, it's worth noting that a lot of the misinformation about autism on the internet comes from the same kinds of people who like to spread misinformation about a lot of things, like toxins in your food and vaccines and stuff. Or your life will get better if you pay me lots of money for this course. But there are autistic people out there proclaiming some stuff that just is not true. I'm not here to deny that misinformation exists. And I'm not even here to poke holes in that study, to be honest. I think the authors do a good job of noting down all the limitations of it. But like all studies, how it gets reported matters. And almost half of autism content on TikTok is inaccurate. And headlines like this will be and currently are being used to discredit autistic self-advocacy as a concept. There is a huge pushback against the neurodiversity movement, and there kind of always has been. In my response video to Sabina Hossenfelder, I talk in depth about where this pushback is coming from and why. But it's a fact that TikTok has become a place where neurodivergent and disabled and otherwise marginalised people have found a voice and a platform, have found a way to sustain something of a career by making advocacy content, in a world where the alternative might be a life of destitution and isolation. Or it's just neurodivergent teenagers exploring their identities and the world around them out loud as part of an online community. And some people hate that. Some people would prefer that autistic people are not empowered to speak for themselves, thank you very much. That we were not listened to about the reality of our lives. Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, it's gone bad. Some people believe that professionals and maybe even parents should be the ones to spread information about things like autism and disability. Usually, those people have some kind of skin in the charity, advocacy, or research game themselves and feel threatened. And some people are just bigoted arseholes who don't think that we deserve a voice or any attention. That we're just a bunch of arselers who couldn't possibly be trusted to know our own minds. The idea that self-diagnosed neurodivergent TikTokers are going to convince your kid that they're autistic based on nothing but their
feelings.
This is being used to fearmonger among parents, much in the same way we see surrounding gender identity and queerness. And this study is being used as a stick with which to beat autistic advocates. Again, this is not the fault of the researchers who wrote the study, but headlines claiming that half of the autism information on TikTok is inaccurate is, in my opinion, just another branch of this anti-neurodiversity movement. There is misinformation out there coming from the mouths of actually autistic advocates. I counter it a lot myself, as do other actually autistic advocates. I am sorry to be the one to break this news to you, but it's true. There are some bad takes online. There are autistic advocates out there saying things that I don't agree with, things that I think they shouldn't say. And I also think that that's probably fine. I feel I need to make it clear that this is not me giving the green light to autistic advocates to start talking out their arses. The point of this segment is about the scrutiny we face from outside, from anti-neurodiversity campaigners. It's about the discrediting of autism self-advocacy as a whole. It is up to us, our community, to counter the misinformation about us, and we do counter it. I think it's fine that we're not perfect because A, no community is, and B, there are countless self-advocates who are pushing back against misinformation and generalisations. If you're talking shite, someone will come for you. These are conversations for us to have about ourselves, and we are having those conversations. Our community is new and growing and full of some of society's most marginalised people. To expect perfection is an act in futility, and it worries me when I see far more scrutiny being placed on autism self-advocates on TikTok than large, well-funded organisations. I get annoyed, I get frustrated, sure, but I see it as in no way as harmful as the mountains of autism misinformation that have built up over decades of poor research and a lack of understanding. Decades of wrong assumptions about us by people who simply cannot empathise with us. Messages like autistic people are incapable of empathy from mainstream media, large organisations or influential researchers. Messages which are seen and understood by millions upon millions of people. People who might have power. People who aren't teenagers mindlessly scrolling an autism hashtag on TikTok. So yeah, I might get irritated with certain aspects of autism advocacy. I might spot mistakes or shallowness in certain statements. But so what? When you have a marginalised group of vulnerable people who have had decades and decades of being unable to speak publicly about themselves, who have had people from outside that group speaking over and for them for so long, when there is so much misinformation about autism coming from mainstream scientific research and so much of our established media, when these misunderstandings about us lead to our institutionalization, abuse, the loss of rights, and even death, I would say We got bigger problems than TikTokers. And when we entertain the notion that autism is a fad, a trend, a thing that kids are pretending to be for attention, and not just autism, ADHD, being trans, it all gets a similar treatment. The thing we see happening is that professionals, psychologists whose job it is to objectively help patients towards finding answers, they are being influenced by the headlines which claim that the kids these days simply love to call themselves autistic. They are exposed to the idea that it's cool and trendy to be autistic these days. And so they, perhaps subconsciously, can allow that to impact how they approach patients. Not all, of course. Hashtag, not all psychologists. But it's a risk. When something gains traction in the press for being a new, trendy diagnosis, this obviously reaches the mind of people who work in healthcare settings. And we all know that there are good doctors and professionals who keep up with the new literature, who regularly attend conferences and seminars, who never stop being educated in their profession, and those who don't do that. People who hold power over people's health. If they become convinced that serious lifelong disabilities are being seen as trendy by the kids, then I would say that that poses a much bigger risk than
User at Sexy Cryptid Faye 2004
being wrong about ADHD on TikTok. I think it's an unambiguous good thing when autistic people are able to share the truth of their existence, even if we can't apply this truth universally. Even if sometimes it's cringe. Even if sometimes it's wrong. People make mistakes. People talk shit. I think we can all agree that the sheer amount of content out there means that you will find somebody saying anything if you go looking for it hard enough. But individual autistic people talking some shit does not in any way equate to the structural, systemic, and societal misunderstandings, oppressions, and harm which are brought upon the autistic population. And more autistic people talking about themselves, for themselves, is good. More of it, please. We don't need to be perfect. We need to fight. We need to fight against oppressive systems and whole ideologies which force an essentialist view of human nature upon us. And despite there being elements of autism advocacy that I typically swipe away, ignore, disregard as unhelpful, the fact that there is autism content, the fact that there are so many autistic people trying to shed light about the reality of our existence, I would not be here if not for that. And people have said that I've helped them, that I've helped them communicate things to their loved ones, that I've helped them understand important things about themselves. And autism-made content continues to help me every single day, way more than any holistic-led charity or organisation ever does. So while I might point out where misconceptions are being repeated, I might gently encourage other autism advocates to not repeat certain things, I just see that as a part of the ongoing conversation surrounding autism advocacy. No community is a monolith. All communities have their disagreements. And the very concept of an autistic community is, as we must remember, pretty new. I have in the past struggled with the idea of community, especially as it pertains to online ones. It's all very well having stuff in common with other people, sharing an identity, but I, and I think many other people, seek community for much more than that, for a tangible, material kind of support. I have found this kind of support in many different ways, be it forming lasting friendships, which have evolved into more than an online thing, finding ways to communicate more effectively with current friends and loved ones, strengthening our relationships forever, or by finally being able to shape some kind of career like an actual career, rather than 1-year stints at shitty jobs that I will inevitably get fired from if I don't quit before that. You couldn't get more material than that. To learning how to find healthcare professionals and how to better communicate with them, leading to better medical and mental health outcomes. I have literally discovered that I have, now diagnosed, lifelong disabilities from watching internet videos. Absolutely life-changing discoveries that have directly saved me so much pain, anguish, and money. I know so much more about myself, my body, my mind, my relationships, my past, my present, my every single day, only because there are thousands of disabled people out there making content about themselves. I don't know what percentage of the videos I watched would or even could have been assessed as accurate. And I know that the plural of anecdote is not data, but I know that I'm autistic, and I know that I have EDS. And the data on both of those things is still kind of sketchy. Both are underdiagnosed, both are often misunderstood by healthcare professionals, both are hardly understood by the general public, both are so heterogeneous that new things are being discovered about them all the time. Criteria gets rewritten. Even experts in the field change their opinions over time, which is what is so cool and groovy about science, in my opinion. I'm not throwing shade at science when I talk about this stuff. I do, in fact, fucking love science. Is that still a thing? But I also know what has helped me in my day-to-day life and what has not. Doctors have only helped me once I knew what to push for, and I only got access to the kinds of expertise who could confirm my experience once I was already convinced of it. And this is because there is a lack of understanding among healthcare professionals. I repeated the symptoms of EDS numerous times to numerous healthcare professionals. I was presenting fully trained GPs with pages of symptoms to come away with a prescription for physiotherapy and psychotherapy for stress. For so long. It was only when I was like, hey, what about EDS though, that it was even considered. And EDS is a physical thing which is physically examined. Like, there's a list of like physical characteristics that you can just like look and go, oh yeah. There was like that. Then there was the medical history of myself and my family. There was a like description about my pain types and severity. Some information about what I was like as a baby, the physical exam, and finally a genetic test to rule out other things and other forms of EDS. And that was it. That was the diagnostic process. Very much a look and see kind of thing. And doctors still missed it. But autism, that's entirely different. Like with EDS, I can like stretch my skin to see if it's stretchier than other people's. I can look down and see if my scars are atrophic. I can do the Baton test by myself. But do I access my memories in a unique way? Do I focus on the details of an issue rather than the overall issue? I mean, I focus on the details so that I can better understand the overall issue. Do I prefer to go to a theatre or a museum? I think it's obvious that it depends on both the show and the exhibit, don't you? Do I prefer to eat at a restaurant alone or with someone else? Are they paying? I mean, having someone with you means there's less pressure on you to get the server's attention, which I fucking hate. But I do like to eat alone and not have to talk while doing so, because how on earth are you even meant to hear each other over all that chewing anyway? But also, you know, like, I love my partner, so I probably would choose to go for a meal with him rather than going out on my own. Although I do really like to go out by myself, and I do that a lot, although it is kind of scary to be on public transport when you've got no one with you. But also, do I feel my clothes more than other people feel their clothes? How the hell am I supposed to know how people feel their own clothes? Or experience their own senses, for that matter? Can I understand a metaphor? Well, I don't hear "it's raining cats and dogs" and run to the window in tears to witness what surely must be a horrendous scene, do I? So put me down as a yes? Yes, I do. Metaphor expert, right here. Is there a metaphor understander on board? Autistic people in the audience will know that I'm poking fun at the kinds of questions you get on autism tests, and they'll also notice the incredibly autistic way that I think about them. Like, the thing about metaphors, they're not asking, do you always, every time, believe the absolute most literal definition of the metaphor? Like, if someone says they've got something under their skin, do you always express great concern and a willingness to drive them to the dermatologist? That's not what they're asking. The point, apparently, is about your thought process. It's more that they're asking, like, if you hear, "I've got you under my skin," do you initially conceptualize the literal meaning of that? And yes, when I hear "it's raining cats and dogs," I do indeed, every single time, picture cats and dogs falling from the sky. It's horrible. By the skin of their teeth. I know their teeth don't actually have skin. But that's all I can think about. I can imagine having skin on my teeth. Imagine biting into an apple with skin on your teeth. No! But I learned that thing I just said about what's really being asked from autistic advocates, other autistic adults, many of whom have a background in psychology, educating about autism diagnosis. Oh, and also, top tip, that question about theatres or museums, right? What I ask myself is, would you rather go to a theatre that's playing a show that you're not interested in, or would you rather go to a museum with an exhibit that you're not interested in? And the museum always wins. Autism is quite subjective, and it's a lot about the way you think, the way you conceptualise, the way you experience the world in comparison to others. And when you've got few friends because of the autism, and when you tend to read questions in quite a literal black and white way because of the autism, and when you also might have a spot of alexithymia because of the autism, it can be quite hard to answer the questions on an autism test. But the autism criteria are also about your relationships with others. How do other people find you? Do they find you rude, blunt, or unemotional? That's something we do know, because people like to tell us, and people like to blame us, and we like to blame ourselves. And so it can be quite difficult to work out which parts of our relationship problems are there because of autism and not one of the millions of other reasons why people might not get along. It's a trip. I said before that there is no finding yourself quite like realizing you're autistic and setting forth on that particular journey of self-discovery. It causes you to question and second guess everything about yourself. People gonna tell us that we don't know our own mind? I thought about nothing but my own mind for 2 years. I conducted a full-scale research project on my own mind. I have spreadsheets. I literally do have spreadsheets. Pages and pages, files within files. Getting your head around all the stuff that you're expected to get your head around when you're going through an autism assessment, either formal or self-inflictedly, it's difficult. It's really hard work. In fact, I remember early on getting so much help from listening to other autistic adults talking about their diagnostic journeys. YouTubers like Yosamdi Sam, who has a background in psychology and makes educational content about autism, ADHD, being an autistic parent in a neurodiverse household, and all kinds of neurodivergent stuff. She made a few videos about what the process was like for her, and I found them to be so unbelievably helpful when I was going through the process myself. But you know what she's gone and done now? Only made a whole ass book designed to help people figure out whether they're autistic or not. Only gone and made something that I would have killed for when I was going through that. Well, maybe not killed, but paid money.
Hi.
It's Yosemite Sam. Please tell us how you came to create this workbook.
I've always been sort of a person who likes creating things, and I always kind of wanted to write a book, right? And I probably will write more. And actually, I ended up taking this course. It was a very kind of roundabout way that actually led to this. So I'll tell you, I ended up taking this course run by a neurodivergent person, which was how to publish your journal in a week, right? It's very ADHD, isn't it? Like, use that hyper focus. And in it, they sort of laid out the templates and exactly how you do it. So that was all the practical stuff. And I was thinking, this would be really cool, except instead of a journal, it would be like processing your thoughts from that initial point of, I've just seen one of Sam's videos and, oh my God, this describes me. What do I do now? From that point onwards to the point where you get your diagnosis and beyond. Because I think that is a very difficult time, and it can be a time that lasts, it can last a very long time, because obviously there's waiting lists. People might not even have access to diagnosis. And so there's a lot of time where you feel a bit like you're in limbo. And for me, I kind of made this giant Google Doc sort of thing. I think it was 7 pages, like listing all of my traits and stuff, and like cross-sectioning, referring to the DSM and all that kind of stuff, which was helpful. But I thought, like, maybe not everybody wants to do that, and maybe that's a bit confusing if you take a document like that into the to the assessment. So what I wanted to do was find a way to structure it that would kind of like hold people's hands a little bit. There's a lot of information online, but it's very overwhelming, and it's really difficult to know what actually counts, right? Because so much your own life is very normalized within yourself. Everything that you do feels normal because it's what you've been doing for however long. So I think I just noticed that there was really nothing for this quite large group of people who were the confused person who's just trying to figure things out. That's the target audience. And also it's the questions that are going to be asked in the assessment. And a lot of the times, you know, when you get a question like, think about your friendships, and you're kind of put on the spot, you're like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? But if you've already done this and thought about, like, did any friendships end suddenly with you not really knowing what happened? If you've gone like, oh yeah, I remember that, and you know what's sort of like relevant to what they're going to be asking and what they're going to be looking for. So yeah, what I wanted to do was try and make it align with the DSM while also not making the person feel bad about themselves, because the way that the DSM is written, you know, the diagnostic criteria are still very much based on deficits, the deficit model of like, are you not good at this? Are you not good at this? Do you have these strange behaviors? And what I wanted to do was talk about those things, but rather than saying, you know, do you have social deficits? Say like, do you struggle with making friends or keeping friends, you know?
Oh yeah, reading back over my diagnostic report was like hard. Because according to it, I'm pretty obviously autistic, and the whole time I was like worried that they wouldn't be able to tell.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I was thinking, oh yeah, I'm so good at masking. She probably won't even be able to tell, you know. And then, you know, in the last session, she was like, yeah, well, it was an easy diagnosis to make. And I'm like, really? Was it though? Was it that easy?
I talk quite a lot about how other autistic people helped me towards diagnosis, and I was wondering if you had any similar stories, and also what was your diagnostic process like?
There wasn't that much content back then. There were a couple, and you know, I had that initial moment from a YouTube video, although I don't think she's still making videos anymore. So of course, you know, I have a background in psychology, so I do feel quite confident reading documents like the DSM and deciphering them to actually know what they mean. And it's written in very, very opaque jargonistic language. As far as the actual process goes, it was reasonably smooth. Obviously, I live in the Netherlands and things are set up a little bit less, how do I say, painfully than in the UK or maybe in the US. You know, it's a few months waiting list sort of thing, which is fine because it gives you a bit of a chance to think about things. And then I had 3 sessions of 2 hours. It was intense, but the actual process was fine. And then, you know, to be honest, it was very anticlimactic. It was like, yes, you're autistic. I'm like, oh, cool. What now? Do I get a medal or something? But in the Netherlands, you know, the funding, or at least the setup is a lot better. So after that, I was referred to an organization, and then, you know, you get coaches basically provided for you, which is something that I'm still entitled to, and I will be entitled to, which is really excellent. Yeah, the support post-diagnosis for adults is really incredible here, and I'm very aware that, you know, that doesn't exist in most other countries.
The book is amazing. Do you think you'll make any more?
I'd love to. It was really a lot of fun, and, you know, I probably could approach a publisher, but I actually really had a lot of fun doing it myself. I don't know, I've got the blurry effect on, so I'll see if I put it next to my face. No, because now it's like, this is not face. There are chapters which provide information, and then there are sections for writing in. So it's kind of a mixture of journal prompts or guided prompts, but also some information and a little bit of chit chat to kind of like, you know, warm you up. There's a glossary at the back and some further resources. And it's not really designed, this isn't a diagnostic thing. By the end of it, you'll have an idea. It's more about organizing your own thoughts. But, you know, your question wasn't that. Your question was, you know, do I want to write another one? I think I would really like to. I think that there is definitely a gap for practical help for autistic adults. Like you said, you know, using my skills and my background in psychology plus my experience, sort of find myself in a good position to be able to do that. So hopefully there will be other things. Do you have any ideas? What would be a good book?
Share your ideas in the comments. It is beautiful, I must say. It's quite stimmy.
Thank you. I had this idea of making a low sensory version because I was very conscious about being accessible, and people have told me that the font, well, at least the main font that I'm using is dyslexic friendly. I think it would just be really cool to have a book and then like, okay, this is the super unicorn rainbow galaxy glitter version. There's no glitter on it. And then also be like, okay, but for people who don't like that kind of thing, here's like a lower sensory calm version for you. But I think at the moment for me, it's like trying to be realistic and not overly ambitious.
Listening to other autistic people made me change my life and my behaviours in ways that were really beneficial. That's actually kind of what pushed me towards getting assessed in the first place, was like, oh, all these tips for autistic people seem to be really helping me. Like I was living as if I was autistic, and it really helped.
That's something I kind of do. It's not living as if I'm autistic, but it's a kind of like a thought experiment that I do when I'm struggling with some aspect of myself. And I say to myself, well, how would an autistic person deal with this? Or how would an autistic person react to this? And I can tell that immediately. You know, yesterday I was in the UK. I did like a very, it was less than 24 hours. I was actually in the UK. So I was up early, took the train from Amsterdam to London, came back or whatever like this. So in these situations, I've started saying to myself, how would an autistic person react to a change in routine and getting up early in the morning, traveling by themselves, also being behind on the work that you were meant to be doing? Like, how would an autistic person react? And you go, well, obviously that would be something that would cause them significant stress. And then you're like, aha, bingo, gotcha. You get to gotcha yourself, you know, because even when you have a diagnosis, it's still the imposter syndrome's there, right? That's very dangerous when you're trying to cultivate self-care and self-compassion, you know, because if you start to think that your autism is light or mild or less autism-y, it gives you an excuse to ignore your needs and push through when you really can't do certain things, you know? And then that's why you get a lot of high masking, high achieving, very successful autistic people burning out all the time. But there's not as many resources for ADHD, right? So a lot of the things that are helpful for autistic people sort of directly conflict with the things that are helpful for people with ADHD. I described it the other day as it's a bit like having, you know, those little cartoons where you have like a devil and an angel on your shoulder. It's sort of like that, except it's like autism and ADHD who are like fighting it out. That would be an awesome video to do. I just would need to get a green screen for that, you know. There are more people obviously talking about it, and now that you know, short form video has become a thing in the 5 years since I was diagnosed, and TikTok is there. There's a lot more information about it. There are a lot more people sharing their experiences now of ADHD, but there's still not very much, you know, like professional information about it. And there's a big research gap there. They know that there's a big overlap, and they know that, you know, that the diagnostic criteria are very contradictory at times, and yet there isn't really any good information about it. So I would say there's a big gap there for good content, good strategies and things. And I, you know, like I would make that content, but I'm still trying to figure out my own strategies, right? But you know, I definitely saw a lot of short form videos, which is just like lesser known, I'm gonna do the dance, lesser known symptoms of ADHD, and it's like trouble with socializing, sensory issues, and I'm like, yeah, you know what a person with ADHD with all of those problems is called? It's like an autistic person, because there's no barrier, right? And that's good in a way. The democratization of content creation is good in a way, but like if you've got ADHD but you're also autistic, that's kind of an important thing to know about yourself, right?
Thank you so much for taking this time to talk to me. Everybody go and show Yosemite Sam some love in the comments, and obviously subscribe to her if you're not already. Autism assessments are daunting. It can be a challenge to work out what is even being asked. You are forced to think about every part of your being and life in a way that you have never had to before. There were times when I would get so overwhelmed by that I began to doubt everything. I was desperately trying to organise my thoughts and feelings in a way that offered some semblance of meaning. This workbook does that for you. It's arranged into logical sections which are then placed in a logical order, which we autistics do love to see. I have linked to where you can buy it in the description, and it's not one of those affiliated links. I'm not getting anything for this. This is just autistic community in action. See also the work of ASAN and Neurodiversity and those people that did that amazing report on the scientific literature. You really should read it, it's really good. All the incredible autistic scientists, researchers, psychologists, doctors, creators, artists, journalists, makers, writers and lawyers currently changing the oppressive systems which affect us all. This is autistic community in action. This is autistic self-advocacy in action. People can think that autism self-advocacy is just self-diagnosed TikTok teens out there turning the frickin' kids autistic. That it's woke silliness at best, and at worst, a danger to the very fabric of truth and reality. A threat towards the very foundations of scientific inquiry and free speech itself. Not joking. See my latest for details. But it's not that. It's this. And it's me. And it's the countless others who are trying to make life better for autistic people. We might not be perfect, and we might not always agree, but we are here. We are doing the work, and we are not going away. Thank you for watching. And please, if you like my work, then do come and follow me elsewhere, and also consider signing up for Patreon so I can keep doing what I do. Okay, love you, bye!